Welcome to this crash course in the Italian wine region of Valle d'Aosta. You're going to learn exactly what makes Valle d'Aosta a unique wine producing region, what types of wines are coming out of that region, and where you should begin your journey in exploring these wines. I'm Tony Margiotta. I'm a wine importer and author of Hidden Gems of Italy. My life's mission is to look for world-class artisanal wines handcrafted in small batches from Italy, many of which have been overlooked and undervalued. My family's from a small village in the Molise region of southern Italy, and I've been traveling to Italy over 20 years, immersing myself in Italian food, wine, and culture. So where is Valle d'Aosta? Well, as you can see here in the map, it's in the northwestern corner of the boot of the Italian peninsula. It happens to be the smallest region in all of Italy. It's located, its borders are shared with the Piemonte region to the south, and it's shared with France to the west, and shared with Switzerland to the north. So it's a very, very interesting region. Valle d'Aosta is an extremely mountainous region, and it has some of the highest mountains in all of Italy. The highest peaks of the Alps are in this region. The Celts and the Ligurians were the first inhabitants in this valley. Eventually, the Romans conquered this area around 25 BC and made it a strategic colony positioned to secure the mountain passes. The Romans built bridges and roads through these mountains. The Roman colony was called Augusta Praetoria Salassorum, named after the first emperor of Rome, Emperor Augustus. And actually, that's where Valle d'Aosta derives its name. It literally means Valley of Augustus. In fact, you can still see the ancient Roman walls around the city of Aosta, as well as the Arch of Augustus, still intact for people to see today. Now, what's interesting about Valle d'Aosta compared to other Italian regions is that the French language was the first official government language in the region, even before France itself. I think it's about 3 years later that French, the language French, became the official language in France. And this happened in Valle d'Aosta in the year 1536. French became the official language. And over the last 500 years, the French have occupied and ruled this region off and on, which is why both Italian and French are official languages in this region. So interestingly, you'll also find both French and Italian written on the wine labels. In terms of winemaking in Valle d'Aosta, since it's surrounded by the Alps, it has the highest elevated vineyards in all of Europe, which lays the groundwork for some very, very unique wines. So how should you think about Valle d'Aosta wines? Like all Italian regions, you should learn some of the native grape varietals and also be familiar with the Appalachians. What are some of the important native Valle d'Aosta grapes? Well, in generally speaking, before I get into these, there's lots of French varietals, as you can imagine, grown and made wines with in this region. Lots of Pinot Noir, lots of Pinot Gris, lots of Chardonnay. But I think it's more enriching to explore the region's native varietals, which are unique to Valle d'Aosta. So generally speaking, the wines of Valle d'Aosta tend to be mineral and floral driven, and the region has historically produced more red wines than whites. Among the familiar varietals you may already know of that are Italian, you'll notice on this list for the whites, there's Moscato, which is excellent in Valle d'Aosta, and it tends to be dry, whereas in most of the other regions, you tend to see more sweet versions of Moscato. And also Nebbiolo. If you look down to the bottom of the reds list, there's a varietal in Valle d'Aosta that they call Picotendro in Italian or Picotene in French, but it happens to be the same thing as Nebbiolo from the Piemonte region. Very interesting. Among the white varietals, the only native white grape that comes out of Valle d'Aosta is this grape called Brie. And Brie is cultivated in the highest vineyard in all of Italy, And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the vineyards that are cultivating this grape are somewhere between 3,200 and 4,000 feet above sea level. It's an incredible, unique place to grow grape varietals, and a unique wine comes from it. On the reds, the most important red for sure is the Petit Rouge. Notice how it's written in French. In fact, most of the varietals in the region typically have French names, not Italian names, which is also very, very unique to the region. Then you have Fumaine, Cornalen, and there are many, many others. But these are the most important ones. You'll find them blended together. You'll also find monovarietal versions. And so if you've seen my other videos, you'll know that I always stress the fact that you should look for smaller producers that are cultivating and making these native wines from Italy before you sort of put a check mark off and say, okay, I've tasted this grape or that grape. I liked it, I didn't like it, and let me move on. I would say before you move on to anything else, that of course you should try an artisanal version made in a small batch before you move on. Well, in Valle dAosta, there are many, many small producers. In fact, there's probably more small producers than there are big producers. So it's sort of an easier, if you can get your hands on some wines from Valle dAosta, it's very likely that the wine is probably coming from a small producer anyway. There's only a few big ones. Okay, let's look at the Appalachians. This is also very particular. Besides the grape varietals being named in French, this region from an Appalachian perspective is unique as well, in the sense that there are no DOCGs and there's only one DOC, which is wild. And of course, it makes sense because it's a very, very small region. But within that appellation, which is Valle dAosta DOC, there are 7 little villages that cultivate different varietals, and they're listed here in this screen here. And so one interesting thing about these 7 different communes, if you start to look from the right over here and work your way this way on the map, you'll notice that if you were to look these up, the elevation continues to climb going in this direction until you get all the way up here, which is where the pre-native white grape varietal is grown, which is the highest elevated vineyards in all of Italy. Okay, so normally I would recommend what I think are the most important appellations in the region. Suffice to say, there's only one appellation to check out from the region. I'd also back up for a second. Usually different varietals are better in some of these 7 communes, better than others. And so I'll recommend a red pretty soon from one of these communes in just a minute. So what's the first white wine you should try from Valle dAosta? Well, this is the wine that's made with the pre-native varietal. It's called Blanc de Morges et la Salle. And this is made with 100% pre. Definitely worth checking out. And then the first red wine you should try is called Torrette. Now, Torrette is one of the 7 communes in Valle dAosta. And this is typically a Petit Rouge blend, or there's also 100% Petit Rouge monovarietals. But definitely try to find the wines coming from this area. This is where the crus of Petit Rouge come from. And that's pretty much it for Valle dAosta. So make sure you subscribe to Gladiator Wine TV so you don't miss out on new videos about artisanal Italian wines and much more. And remember, great wines are not made in great numbers.